Yes, sir. Gentleman in the black sweater.
All right, so there you have the announcement officially coming down from the St. Louis County prosecutor. No indictment on any charge whatsoever. Let's go back out live now to RT correspondent Alexei Yaroshevsky, who is standing by right now. Alexei, as you heard there, the grand jury heard the evidence, we are told, and decided that there was not evidence to return an indictment on any charge whatsoever, and that includes whether the police officer acted criminally and whether or not he was involved in the commission of any kind of a crime. Your response?
Well, we haven't heard so much response here, although in this area around the Clayton Justice Center, which is completely cordoned off by the police, some group of protesters, they still managed to get inside, and we just heard rather angry chants of hands up, don't shoot, and no justice, no peace, pretty much the same things that the protesters have been saying all along. We are pretty much will be on our way to the ground zero, to the Ferguson Police Department. That's where the crowds are gathering right now, and the feeling here on the ground is that the news of no indictment to Officer Wilson will not go down well with those protesters. It's not that it's a complete surprise to them. They've been sort of morally prepared for this kind of decision. That's what we've been hearing from them for the past several weeks. And of course, the biggest question right now is whether the protesters would listen to the family of Mike Brown, to the authorities, and to everyone else, urging them to stay calm and non-violent, because we saw what happened in August here in Ferguson, Missouri. It was very, very violent scenes, unheard before in Missouri, and there are clear indications that things like this can happen during the night here. So we are bracing ourselves for a very long and possibly even a violent night here in Missouri.
All right, well, Alexei Yaroshevsky, thank you so much for your time on that. We know that you will be, as you said, moving from where you are in Clayton over to Ferguson, the police department there. We do have live pictures from over that area. There do not seem to be any violent demonstrations taking place at this point, which is certainly good news. Want to bring back into the conversation civil rights activist Perry Red, attorney Patrice Sultan. We did have, by the way, our guest from New York, Dante Berry, who was with us, and he actually left after hearing that decision. So we'll have to catch up with him later and see what caused that immediate response. I want to get first responses from you all in what you heard. No indictment whatsoever. The explanation, essentially 12 jurors heard all of the evidence. And as the prosecutor pointed out, he says these 12 people are the only people to have heard all of the evidence and heard from all of the witnesses involved. Your responses each.
So what was interesting to me was the explanation of the facts that were presented to the grand jury, right? So if the issue was what degree of homicide should they charge here, then really what they have to decide is whether there was justification for the way that the officer acted. We didn't hear anything about the description of the perpetrator that he was looking for having a weapon. We didn't hear anything about Michael Brown presenting a weapon or making any threatening statements or doing anything that would cause an officer or a person exercising reasonable care to fire 12 shots at an unarmed black teenager. I mean, all we heard was that he turned around toward the officer, perhaps started moving toward him, and that there was a lethal response. And so it's unusual, or I guess it's difficult to understand how the jury would not at least return an indictment for involuntary manslaughter, which only requires a reckless action on behalf of Officer Wilson. And so I think that the evidence of 60 witnesses, which is quite unusual, had to have been presented to the jury in a way that that was designed to get that outcome.
Perry, I noticed during the announcement as it was read, you were shaking your head. One of the things that was said, 12 rounds were fired in all. 2 were fired inside the vehicle by Officer Wilson. 10 were fired on Canfield Street. The prosecutor did say that blood and DNA were found inside of the driver's door that belonged to Mike Brown, his DNA and his blood, inside the driver's door, on Officer Wilson's clothing, shirt, pants, and on his weapon as well, which would seem to corroborate the story that there was a struggle. Your response to that, and do you think that still justifies 10 shots separately outside the vehicle after Mike Brown has fled?
I want to answer your last question first. No, it doesn't justify anything. What we just witnessed was a very skillful 4-month trial by media. The prosecutor was very, very skillful in putting together the leaks that led to this, and then how it's presented to the jury. Again, it was just absolute genius, and so he should get an Academy Award among anything else he gets and maybe he'll run for governor or something one day. But what's problematic from a non-academic point of view is very simply that I don't know what kind of cowboy force they've got, but I don't know anywhere where I've seen police shooting suspects from inside of a car. It's all problematic to me. The indictment should have happened, and of course I expected it didn't. It wouldn't happen. If I was a betting man, I'd be rich today. And so factually speaking, if hell breaks loose, it's well-deserved on this country, and I'm hoping that boycott will also come into play with the protests, because we have the same thing that happens in same steps: shock, and then anger, then the investigations, then the condolences, and then the kumbaya moment that's coming soon, and then back to business as usual.
He talked